but we're going to talk games and teams with my man Chip Patterson, CBSSports.com, Cover 3 podcast moderator. Thank you very much, as always, for joining us on Wednesdays. I loved the Upon Further Review edition of the Cover 3 podcast. I think you and Danny Cannell, who comes on the show every once in a while, and Tom Fornelli, who has no time for us, but that's fine. Fornelli, you guys are all great, so I appreciate all that you guys do. So you and I have already chatted offline about what we're going to start with. Tennessee beats Alabama, and it really is set up for, essentially, I'll just use this because why not, an SEC three-way with, I apologize for starting there, because we have Alabama the rest of the way, the toughest regular season game they'll play other than the rivalry game with Auburn, which they should have no problem with, but rivalry games. They have a trip to Oxford in a few weeks. They have to go down and play Ole Miss, and they're an undefeated top 10 football team at this point.
That's going to lose at LSU.
Yeah, okay. Very possible. And I heard you say that, and I'm not even arguing that. But I'm just saying that's Alabama's toughest regular season game remaining. They've got then Tennessee still has to play Georgia, but I think it's in Knoxville. I'm not 100% sure. I think it is, and that's their toughest remaining game, although it will not be easy. Maybe the game is in Athens, but they have to play Kentucky next Saturday, I believe, under the lights, which I think Kentucky is good. I don't think Kentucky is great. And that's also Georgia's most difficult remaining game. And then one of them is going to play Alabama. So Alabama doesn't lose again. Tennessee loses to Georgia. Georgia loses to Alabama. So now I've got all three of them with one loss. One of them has 12 wins. That would be Alabama in this scenario. How does that shake out with an undefeated Ohio State and an undefeated Clemson team? Because I think Clemson will be undefeated for the college football playoff.
The way that I see that scenario shaking out, first of all, Ohio State is going to start the college football playoff rankings in the top 4, and if they are undefeated, like you've laid out in this scenario, then they're not going to get bumped from the top 4. So Ohio State is in. So what ends up happening is that Alabama will be granted a head-to-head advantage over Georgia, and Georgia will be ahead of Tennessee because of its head-to-head advantage.
Right.
And if Alabama is the conference champion, as you have laid out in this scenario, then I think the conference championship bump puts Alabama and Georgia in, and Tennessee on the outside looking in as a furious one-loss team.
They would be absolutely furious. And that is all logical, but this is my eye test. And I know everybody rolls their eyes at the eye test, but there's really no good way of doing it when we have so limited a sample size of non-conference matchups. It's not like basketball where you've got 8 or 9 or 10 non-conference games against good teams to really parse through these things. If just my eye, I've watched Tennessee. I've watched Clemson. Similar colors. I think Tennessee's better than Clemson.
Disagree. Hard.
Okay. Again, I'm not the expert here.
All right, so the team sheet that the College Football Playoff Selection Committee uses are put together by a company called Sports Source Analytics. Mm-hmm. And it's not like the most advanced statistics, but it is pretty comprehensive. And what Tennessee has is some bad numbers. And they are bad numbers on the defensive side of the
yes.
ball.
They're a better version of North Carolina, right?
Whoa. Hey, Tennessee at least has a Power 5 level defense, not a Conference USA defense, as we have discussed with the North Carolina Tar Heels.
Okay.
Tennessee just has some bad numbers. And Alabama, while our eyes are frustrated on both sides of the ball, Alabama's numbers are not going to spit out with as many bad numbers. They are actually a little bit more balanced in terms of offense and defense, much more so than Tennessee is, where Tennessee is elite offensively and just okay defensively. So when it comes time to justifying some of your decisions and trying to figure out how to stack these teams up against each other, I think that Clemson, which is elite defensively and fine offensively, I think that that's where Clemson's undefeated record, as opposed to having one loss, where Clemson being a little bit more balanced, and where Tennessee, again, just having enough of those bad numbers. I mean, these selection committee members are looking at 18 different statistics, and if there's a couple of reds on there, it's kind of like the NCAA basketball committee when you see the greens and the reds with the bad losses and the Q3 losses. Like, if you've got any bad numbers on there, that is a reason for you to not be winning those tiebreak arguments.
It's kind of hard for me to make these decisions based on statistics because your statistics invariably are built on who you played, right? Whether it's fair or not, I'm going to use this is the way I would process it. I'd love to talk to some of the people in that room and how they really do this. But that game, Alabama at Tennessee, Alabama's defense didn't look elite to me.
Correct.
So is that maybe part of that is obviously Tennessee is elite. I don't want to talk about Hendon Hooker here in a second. But the other part of that is that maybe Alabama was exposed as not having an elite defense. And Alabama has been pushed by teams that, like, I don't know, I didn't think Texas was that good. Then Texas does that to Oklahoma. Maybe Alabama's not quite the team we thought they were.
I think that outside of Ohio State, who I vote in the CBS Sports 131 as the number one team in the country, I think the gap between Georgia and everybody else is smaller than I expected coming into the season. I think the gap between Alabama and everyone else obviously has been exposed to be a little bit less than it was coming into the season. And Ohio State just frankly hasn't been tested to the point, and we may not see a team that is going to test Ohio State to that point until they play Michigan at the end of the regular season. So, like, Alabama's not that great, yes, but what Alabama has is one superstar and enough other good players to be able to win a lot of these games. So I look at that game against Tennessee, and like this was a Tennessee team that benefited from a lot of breaks and also made some mistakes. You know, we always talk about Hendon Hooker. He hasn't thrown in an interception. He had two. One counted, but he had two in that game.
Right.
There's the fumbled mesh point that turns into the quick scoop and score. Like this. When Jahmyr Gibbs, so at halftime of the game, because we'd been talking on the Cover 3 podcast, they said if Tennessee wins, we're going to have cigars for the instant reaction show.
Right.
And at halftime, I go out to the gas station, get only the finest of their selection, a Black and Mild, and I text it to the group chat, which includes diehard Tennessee fan producer Jordan. So beginning of the second half, Jahmyr Gibbs touchdown ties the game, and I'm like, well, I jinxed it. Here we go. You know, this is where it all breaks down. I think that Alabama may not be as good as we thought, but we also probably had an unfair standard for Alabama based on them being Alabama. They're an awesome football team, a team that can win a national championship, but as Tennessee showed, they are not unbeatable.
Yeah, and look, I know this is a separate conversation that maybe we'll have another time. Tennessee, that environment, Neyland Stadium, was that. What an unbelievable. I'm going to finish a sentence at some point here, Chip. The biggest selling point to me about college football has always been that the environments make the games better than they are. And that's cool because the entire package of college football is what gives it I think, a large part of its appeal. That does not exist at all anywhere, really, in the National Football League. So that is the advantage. College football has been way better than the NFL. Way better than the NFL this year. Maybe even the product has been better. But the whole package has been so much better. But I don't know what kind of bump you give Tennessee for that. Like, was that a 10-point bump at home at Neyland this year?
So Alabama's players at Monday's availability said we had anxiety. We were coming into the tunnel and we weren't being ourselves. We weren't focused. And I don't think that is we didn't care about the game. I think that is admitting that they did not bring the right mental approach into this spot. And a lot of people have started to drag Nick Saban's, coaching, decision-making, play calling down the stretch of that game. I've got a galaxy brain theory that I haven't really uncorked yet.
Okay.
I've been saving it for you.
Thank you.
In a way that we have seen Roy Williams and Mike Krzyzewski let their team lose because they think it would help them down the road. I think Nick Saban knew his team had played poorly. had a school record 17 penalties.
They
had not executed well on either side of the ball. They'd had dropped passes. They had been making mistakes all over the place, and they nearly stole a game that Tennessee had outplayed them thoroughly. And this is a game that Alabama, as we discussed at the beginning of the segment, could afford to lose.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a division opponent, and as long as Alabama defeats all of its division opponents and doesn't lose another game, then Alabama can win the SEC championship. A one-loss SEC champion Alabama ain't missing the college football playoff. Right. So this is my super galaxy brain tinfoil hat theory that I've been cooking on for a little bit, probably too long, but Nick just let his team lose. He said, you guys did not have the right mental attitude. You think that you can play your C-plus game and win? You can't. Right. You need to step it up, and that's what it's going to take to win a national championship. It might not be a wake-up call, and if this team ends up losing like one or two more games, I wouldn't be that surprised. If that's the case, man, we might be watching not the end of the dynasty, but we might be watching the real sort of pivot point in Alabama as this Goliath in the sport.
I can't tell how many times we've heard, well, is this the end of the Alabama dynasty? And it's never the end of the dynasty.
If he can't get through to the players, then Nick might check out. That's like, I think Alabama will continue to be elite even after Nick Saban because of what he's built and the blueprint he's laid out. But it might be more like Georgia, where they're winning 10, 11 games, getting top 5 recruiting classes. I think Nick Saban is how you go from a Georgia recruiting level to winning 6 out of 12 national championships. I think the work that Nick Saban has done is going to make it such that you walk in and that program should be able to win 9 games and recruit at a top 5 level for 5 years after he's gone. But if he thinks that he can't motivate these players anymore,
right,
that has led other Hall of Fame coaches to say, that's what tipped me off. Now it's time to get out.
You know, the interesting thing about that, and we'll just hit on this and then we'll take a break because I want to talk to you more about a national look at some teams that are still in it. There's really, in college football, there's only been one school that has not seen any sort of dramatic, if a dip at all, from coach to coach to coach to coach to coach, and that's Ohio State. That's it. Everybody else, every other school has suffered with, Alabama. They won a national championship after Bear Bryant. Gene Stallings did. But for the most part, they were just meh. And then they went through the funny thing about their 15-game winning streak over Tennessee is that Tennessee had kicked their rear ends for about 15 years before then. I think Tennessee won all but 2. I think they won 10 out of 12 in that stretch when, Phil Fulmer was the coach and Alabama was going through all of they were still good, but they weren't great.
Florida, Tennessee was bigger.
From absolutely.
A championship race perspective, that time where Tennessee was dominating Alabama, it's because we looked at Florida, Tennessee as this national championship elimination game.
Florida State hasn't really. I know they had a good run with Jimbo Fisher, but it took him a while to get to that. I just think that the guy who follows Saban at Alabama, you might be able to live off of the talent that's there right away, but there's something else that goes with the talent. Because there have been a lot of talented teams that didn't quite get to what Alabama is. Saban is also an elite coach and motivator. It's going to be very difficult, I think, for Alabama to maintain without Nick Saban. But that's just natural. So, again, only Ohio State has not seen a dip. All right,
is that because of the neighborhood too?
Oh, I think it has something to do with it. Yeah.
Yeah. There's just so many programs that are willing to do whatever it takes.
Yeah. Is that air quotes? Did you air quote that?
No, I was just trying to give you the emphasis of whatever it takes.
I'm air quoting it for Chip Patterson.
To win at the highest level. Ohio State's neighborhood is, it's got some programs that want to do it the right way.